Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Radical Age Reversal. I'm Carrie Donegan, your host, and I'm so thrilled that you're here with me, whether you're watching on our YouTube channel or you are watching on the Win-Win Women Network. We're just so glad that you are here. And the purpose of our show is to help you live long, healthy, productive lives. And we want to give you those tips and tricks and keep you up to date on all of the latest research. And in that vein, I have come across a book that I'm really excited about. It's called 10% Human: How Your Body's Microbes Hold the Key to Happiness and to Health. To Key to Health and Happiness by Ilana Collin. And we're going to take some time to go through this book together because I know you're busy and you don't always have time to read. And it's sometimes nice to sit down with someone who can kind of walk you through a book, break it down, and show you exactly how this information can be used in a very practical way in your life. So firstly, let's go on to our chapter today, which is the introduction. Actually, we kind of did the foreword at the very beginning, and now we're in the introduction. It's called The Other 90%. So in the first part of the book, we talked about the fact that the human genome, your particular genes, are only 10% of who you are. You actually have another 90%, and that's your microbiome. And this is becoming a very popular topic that we're hearing a lot about, especially from the medical and research communities. So go ahead and scour the podcasts and listen to some of the top experts in the field to get the backstory and all the information that you need to really understand. If this is a topic that you love, then go ahead and take a deep dive into that information. So if our human genetics only make up 10% of who we are, do you ever wonder like how many genes that is? Well, they did something about 10 years ago called the Human Genome Project. And one of the things that researchers did, I guess just for fun, was to guess how many genes are contained in the human genome. And then what does that look like compared to other species? And of course, in science, we study small animals because of the way they work in research. For example, we know that a water flea has 31,000 genes, and a mouse has 23,000 genes, and a worm has 20.5 thousand genes. So when you're thinking about a human being, I would assume we're bigger, so we're going to have a lot more genes, right? It would just seem to be logical. And that's what the scientists thought as well. So when people were guessing these numbers, they were guessing some really, really big numbers. And, sometimes nature surprises you. And this is one of those opportunities where that happened. And actually, humans are only 21,000 genes. Now, of course, that's an incredibly complex organism, but it does show you that genetics alone are not the thing that makes something super complex. It also doesn't necessarily spell out intelligence, reason, ability, aptitude. All of that is very complex, and it's not necessarily just embedded in our genetics. We're actually what we call a super organism. Now, we are outnumbered 10 to 1 by these microbes. So 10% of you is human, right? The part that you see. And the other 90% you can't see. It's microscopic. It's these microbes. There's 100 trillion known microbia on your body right now, on, around, in, tucked under, right? So in these little flaps here, behind your ears, on your skin, inside your throat, all of your openings, right? Anytime you have kind of skin flaps or on the skin surface, these are all environments for these microbes that live in concert with us. So there's a mutual relationship there. We benefit from them. They benefit from us. And they're broken basically, just for today's talk, into three main categories. We have things like viruses, which we've heard a lot about in the last couple of years. We have fungi, which sometimes are known as yeasts. You see a lot of that being talked about, good and bad. And the last one is archaea. So those are the things, are archaea, sorry, not archaea, archaea. So which I wasn't really familiar with, obviously, because I couldn't pronounce it. Maybe you know about archaea, but take a look at those. They're like very similar to a bacteria, but again, it's viruses, fungi, bacteria, and archaea. So in the book, when you go through this chapter, she does talk a lot about how all of this information was discovered. So if that's something that really interests you, then go ahead and please get this book and you can read all the details. But for today's limited amount of time, and like I say, what I like to do is actually give you the practical application of this information. We're not going to go into that detail too much. What I want you to know is that it's a little bit difficult to study some of these things. We're just learning about their value to the human body. And we're also learning that we used to spend a lot of time, we still do, I think, focusing on all of the bad things that enter our bodies, the things that actually turn around and make us sick, right? So when I think of a virus, I'm thinking negative. When I think of bacteria, I'm thinking negative. When I think of yeast, I think infection, or I think candida overgrowth and weight gain and all kinds of things like that. I'm not thinking anything positive. I don't know about you, but we should start to change our mindset and understand that actually the majority of your microbiome is actually a good thing. And we don't want to necessarily kill it, clean it, or remove it. So we have to kind of get out of the mindset that everything that we can't see is harmful to us. So she draws our attention to a few things that I think will help to illustrate this in greater, in a bigger picture. Okay, so one of the things she talks about is a cow and a cow's digestion. I've heard a lot of people say, humans should not be eating meat, that's a bad thing, that we have evolved past that, or we were never even designed for meat. Other people will say that, no, we really are a meat-eating mammal, and that's something that we should be doing, and that vegetation isn't something we should be focused on. And the truth is that humans have been eating both meats and plants for millennia. So I don't want to get into the debate of what the perfect diet is. And of course, different people thrive on different diets, different cultures. And it begs the question, why is that? And I think we can find some of the answers in our microbiome. So keep that in mind. What is in your body, what is on your body, what's in your mouth may actually be contributing to whether or not you are thriving when you eat the certain foods that you eat, whether you have sensitivities to certain types of foods, and whether you have allergies. So all of this is connected. So let's talk about our gut, for example, versus a cow's gut. One of the things, the arguments that I've heard before is that you can grow big and strong if you eat only leafy greens, because look at cows, look at what they do. But we also have to go deeper into that animal and to compare it to the human body. So we know the human body and a cow's body don't look anything alike. In fact, even in their construction, a cow has 4 stomachs, we only have 1. And guess what? Their microbiome is completely different from ours. And that's really important to know because, if you were, for example, playing baseball, and you had a highly skilled team of baseball players, you would put them on the field and you would train them in a particular way. You wouldn't put them against a soccer team. You wouldn't put them against a volleyball team. Why? Because they're not trained to do that. So just remember, the microbes that are living in the cow and around the cow are there to serve the cow, and the cow serves the microbes. And just in the same way, human beings have a microbiome that serves them just that way, and they're designed to help them, not necessarily to help a cow. So she also brings up something that I think is really cool, and she takes a deep dive into our appendix. So I don't know how many out there have actually had their appendix removed or suffered from appendicitis. Mostly if you have appendicitis, you end up with the surgery to remove your appendix. And I think it's common that since World War II anyway, Or if you go back even before that to the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there seems to be a common belief that your appendix is an extra part of your body. It's an organ we don't need anymore, and that removing it isn't going to cause you any trouble whatsoever. And you may be someone who says, yeah, that's me. I had my appendix removed and it really hasn't caused any issue for me whatsoever, which is great. But what seems to us have happened is that at the same time that we were using the Industrial Revolution, let me put it that way, or there was a parallel development between the Industrial Revolution and pharmacology, that these chemically based synthetic cleaners, drugs were actually being formulated and introduced into human society and being used in human society, that better hygiene practices were being used, cleaner water, cleaner sanitation, the idea of just washing your hands came into play, that you see a decline in certain diseases, right? And you also see this increase in appendicitis. So what's going on here? What's interesting about that is now that we can study the appendix and we can study the microbiome of the appendix and what's in the appendix, what we realize is that it is absolutely nutrient dense, if you will. So it's rich in microbes, and it seems to be a holding place for these microbes. It's been talked about as a microbial stockpile, microbial, sorry, I put those words together, a microbial stockpile or a nest egg for the immune system. So if you end up with food poisoning, for example, or a gastrointestinal flu or sickness of some kind, it seems that that is when the microbes in the pancreas, and sorry, not pancreas, in the appendix seem to go to work. And that is why we actually need our appendix more than we thought we did. So before you decide that you have a whole bunch of extraneous body parts and you want to get rid of them, I think about my tonsils and my adenoids. I had those taken out as a kid. And now I'm starting to wonder, maybe that wasn't the greatest idea. Maybe there were other ways that I could have actually balanced my body and had it overcome some of these issues instead of removing body parts that were put there for a reason. And we're learning these reasons. Now, of course, if you had this removed, if you had your tonsils removed, your adenoids, your appendix, you can't just go back and say, oh, I'm broken now and everything isn't going to work. That's not the case. But it is good to know that we want to maintain our microbiome and we want to actually think about it, even if we don't see it, and we want to take care of it. So that's really seems to be the intersection, that hygiene went up and appendicitis went up. And it could be that the microbes that are in our appendix, the microbes that are in our microbiota, were actually being killed off by these new chemical cleaners, by new pharmaceuticals. And so what was natural and what was already inside of us, that balance of the microbes was now out of balance. And too many chemicals were causing yet another problem. So it's a little bit of a give and take. When we had a lot of infectious disease that spread wildly and couldn't be contained, we decided that the best course of action was a synthetic chemical solution. But what we're finding now that we're studying the microbiome is that the chemical solution that we use to kill off infectious disease may be actually causing internal issues by killing off too much of our microbiome. And that's where this whole gut microbiome project came into being. This is where people were having their stool tested just to see what's still living inside of them, what has died out. What do antibiotics do? Now, if you saw the last episode and you read the first introduction of this book, you learned that antibiotic means against life, right? And it is completely non-discriminating. So it kills all the bacteria in your body. It doesn't leave the good bacteria and get rid of the bad bacteria. So I believe modern science is going to go in a direction where they are going to see what we can use to be more discriminating. Now, we do have things that we at our disposal right now in nature that is more discriminating and yet highly effective against killing off the negative bacteria, viruses, and fungi we don't want in our body, but keeping the good. And we have studies to show that this actually works this way. I've talked a lot about thyme oil, I've talked about oregano, but I wanted to actually show you some of the plants. And I want you to kind of look beyond what you see, both on your human person and on some of these aromatic essential oil based plants, and see how there is a relationship between the two. So this is a leaf of an aromatic plant, and you can just crush it between your fingers. This happens to be parsley. And you can start to smell the essential oils. Now, let's think in terms of our microbiome. What am I doing? Who's interacting? What's happening? So when I take my fingers and I put the, I put the piece of parsley on my fingers, what happens is that the two microbiomes start to connect. So any bacteria that is on this leaf, or any virus or fungi or archaea that happen to be here, interact with the microbiome on my skin, right? And then if I were to eat this, which is delicious, I can taste some of that aromatic. I can then know that the saliva in my mouth, right, which also may have some mucus, right, that all of those are environments for my microbiome. And that those microbes are now reacting with the microbes in the parsley. And if the microbes in the parsley are necessary for the microbes in my mouth, then they have a mutual relationship. And when I swallow it, it will also go into my stomach, especially once it enters the cecum, which is a really special place. Once you get through your small intestine, where there's tons and tons and tons and trillions of microbiota there to actually help your immune system, help your hormones, and improve your longevity, to help your lifespan, help your health span, reduce aging. All of that is really good, and your skin. So when we say, staying young happens from the inside out, that's one of the things we're talking about. But it's not just about the nutrients you're putting in your body. It's what those nutrients and what those essential oils are doing in relationship with your microbiome and the interplay between the two. Now, I can also do something like take an essential oil that's already bottled. This is rosemary from doTERRA, and I can use this a couple of ways. So let's think again in terms of our microbiome and what's happening. I'm going to take a few drops, put it in my fingertips. And the first thing I'm going to do is rub them between my fingers. At this point, there is an exchange going on between the microbes on the essential oil and the microbes on my fingers. And that would be true if I were to rub my temples. Now, I know if I'm thinking about how this feels or my reaction, or I'm being mindful of using essential oils, I can say, oh, I feel like I'm breathing more easily, or I feel like my memory or my brain feels a little bit sharper, a little bit more focused. I feel like my airways are opening up and I can breathe more deeply, or I may even feel a little bit of an energetic boost. Now, how does that happen? Where does it come from? Well, we used to think it had to do with the chemical constituents of these essential oils. At least that's the way I was trained for the last 20 years. But what we know now is actually it's not only doing that, but it's turning on a relationship between the microbes that it has with the microbes that I have in and on my body. Now, the last thing that I can do is actually just take a drop of that rosemary, put it on my tongue. I like to actually press my tongue to the roof of my mouth, because I really feel that that goes right into my nasal cavity. It goes into my olfactory system. That's sort of that um, command center for essential oils when they enter the body, and it starts to create a cascade of information that spreads through your body. So if rosemary has a particular ability that I need, it will travel to those receptor sites so that it could help with maybe inflammation, or it could help with focus, it could help with memory, it could help with energy, whatever it is that I might be lacking. Now, we can also talk a little bit about, things that come like just from scratching the outside of a citrus fruit, right? So bergamot has all these essential oils. Just think about the outside of a citrus fruit, the tons and tons of microbes that are on it. And people will say, oh, well, I'm going to wash them, right? So if you just rinse them under a sink, what you're doing is actually you're adding the microbes from the water, and maybe you're rinsing off like some dirt. But when you're rinsing off the dirt, you're also rinsing off some of the really good microbes that could go inside your body. Now, I'm not advocating that people go out and start eating dirt. But what I am saying is that dirt in and of itself isn't necessarily a bad thing. And one of the things that actually may be bad is the fact that we've started to spray that dirt with pesticides and other chemicals and herbicides and things that have actually killed the microbiome that was good for us in the dirt. So one of the pieces of advice that was shared with me that I'm going to share with you is that if you go on a hike and you go somewhere natural that hasn't, that isn't highly sprayed, or that the groundwater isn't contaminated and toxic, and you're just like climbing and touching trees and sitting on logs and enjoying the fresh air, and you pack a lunch and you're about ready to sit down and eat your lunch. You don't have to actually get out your hand sanitizer and try to kill all the bacteria from your hand before you eat. In fact, it may be better for you to just brush off your hands, like rub them on your jeans, and go ahead, open up that lunchbox and enjoy your meal, because you've interacted with some great microbes in your environment that your body was designed to interact with. And it may actually be something that helps your immune system, that helps your hormone balance, and helps your longevity. So don't be too quick in a natural environment to brush off the dirt. However, if you find yourself in a highly chemically laden environment, if you went somewhere and they do a lot of spraying or there is a lot of sanitizing, then you definitely want to do what you can to keep your body from being in contact with those chemicals. It's really, really not a good practice to be constantly using chemically based hand sanitizers. Water and a mild soap is always going to be your best course of action when it comes to sanitation. Now, there's a doctor that came out with a book that I'm really interested in reading. It's called Clean. I believe he did not wash for 5 years and studied his physical microbiome and his health. And I think the results were actually pretty positive, which is kind of astounding. I don't think I'm there yet. I'm not ready to stop showering or washing my hands, certainly not washing my hair. And I'm someone who loves a little bit of makeup, as you can see. So that would be a big stretch for me, but I think it would be kind of cool to see how all of that would play out. Let's see. In closing, I just want you to take away 3 things that you can do moving forward to help your microbiome based on the chapter that we read again from this book, 10% Human Today. So tip number 1 is I want you to put your hand sanitizer away for a while and only use it in times of emergency. And if you do have to use one, I would recommend that you use one that's all natural. My favorite is the doTERRA On Guard hand sanitizer. So there's no chemicals in here that you have to worry about. It's all essential oils that are doing the sanitizing. If you can, however, your best bet is mild soap and water is always going to be a better choice. Tip number 2, Make sure that you are eating a variety of plants and try to eat them fresh because they have their own microbiome. And when you eat them, whether it's a piece of ginger or a piece of parsley, you're giving your microbiome something to react with, and there's going to be an interplay. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is making sure that you don't use too many chemicals internally. So I want you to go home and look at your mouthwash. That's going to be my number one tip. And if your mouthwash has any chemicals that you can't read, then you're going to say goodbye to it, because the mouth microbiome is extremely important, especially for your cardiovascular health. And so those are 3 easy tips you can do. Number 1, remove your mouthwash, switch to something all natural. I like the doTERRA mouthwash, but you can even put a drop of cinnamon in a shot glass full of water and wish that around your mouth. I also like myrrh. I like, of course, any of the mints, spearmint, peppermint, bergamot mint, Japanese peppermint. Those are all very refreshing and great. They're not going to disturb the microbiome. Okay, so we do know that. You don't have to worry about essential oils disturbing the microbiome. The second thing I said was to not overuse your hand sanitizer, right? And then eat some of those herbs and spices and aromatics, because they are loaded with good things for your microbiome. So all of those are things that you can do today and you can carry on in the week, and it's not going to cost you anything, but it may actually make your body stronger. I'm so glad we spent time together. Next week, we're going to go on to the next chapter. Thanks for joining me at this new time, 11 o'clock on Mondays Eastern and Pacific time. I believe we're 8 a.m. Pacific. We're going to read chapter 1, 21st Century Sickness. Very, very eye-opening, this book. So don't be dismayed. Don't be discouraged. Just know that you can, with a few little changes, you can actually make your health a lot better. I really appreciate your time. I'll see you next week.